Welcome back to the shop. Dave here. All right, today we're working on a 2008 Toyota FJ Cruiser. You may recognize this from the light bar installation video. It's back. When it was here for that job, I noticed that it had an axle seal leaking on the driver's side rear axle. So I'll walk you back there and we'll show you that. As you can see, this rotor is coated in fluid. It's leaking out of the axle seal, which is, seals the diff fluid. It's supposed to hold it in the rear end housing and not let it seep out. Well, it's letting it seep out. It's getting all over the brakes. We've got some uneven pad wear. This outer pad's wearing a lot faster than the inner. Of course, everything's soaked, stinks. Stuff gets hot, starts smelling bad. These Toyotas are kind of notorious for this. I had a 4Runner, 96 4Runner for years, and I had to do them like 2 or 3 times, I believe, throughout the span that I had that. We're going to get started here. We're going to get the caliper bracket removed and see what we got to do to get this. There's 3 bolts, I believe, that holds this axle in. We're going to need to slide the whole axle assembly out because the seal is in the housing itself. It's in this tube. So the bearings and everything will come out on the axle shaft, and the seal is replaceable separate, so you don't have to take the bearings off the axle. You can, like on a Jeep, like Grand Cherokees and stuff like that, you've got the seal is on the axle in front of the bearings, so you've got to cut the bearings off to get the seal out, so you're forced to replace the axle bearings at the same time. On this model, you don't have to. So we'll get set up, get to work. We're going to let a little pressure off the caliper. We are going to be replacing these pads, so I'll go ahead and collapse it all the way. We will need to take this clip off the brake line at the top. Since we have to take this backing plate and everything's got to come off, we're going to go ahead and take the brake line out of the hose where it's separate, because it holds in between here, and I thought this was going to break where I could slide it out of the bracket, but it's not. So we've got to separate this, so we'll end up having to bleed the brakes, which is not a big deal. But the reason we're putting shoes or pads on is because the contamination and it's not totally worn out, but they're getting really close on this outside pad. So we'll get some good pads put on here and clean this rotor up real nice, and should be good to go with a seal and brake pads. 10mm. This vehicle's got a little bit of a rust situation. So I've opted for my line wrench to make sure it doesn't strip anything out. Alright, with the line out of the way, we're going to go ahead and pop the caliper bolts out. Caliper bracket bolts out. We're going to go for these 3 bolts that holds the axle in. There's 4 bolts. There's another one there. I did not see it first, and that happens sometimes. Not a big deal. All right, I'm gonna make an attempt to not take this brake cable loose or any of the parking brake stuff. I've got the ABS sensor unplugged, so I can pull this back, which you can see I've already popped it loose. I've got the parking brake cable undone from the frame. You can hear my kids because they're off on spring break, and we're not going anywhere. So I'm gonna attempt to pull this out and see if this gives me enough room to pull this axle out. I don't know if it will. We're gonna give it a shot. Yep, I was right. All right. Okay, so you can pull all this off without taking a bunch of crap apart. You don't need to take everything apart. You can see the spring for the seal is popped out, and that's why it's leaking. Okay, so we're going to pop this seal out. It's the end of the day. We're about to cook out, grill some food. In the morning, I'll grab me an axle seal, some brake pads. I'll clean all this mess up, and we will pop it back together, see how she does. Okay, with the axle out of the way, we're going to try to pop this seal out. So I've got a seal removal tool, and mine's a little tweaked. I got a little over heavily handed on it years ago, and it bent it, and I should have replaced it then, but I haven't. Usually it still works pretty good. I'm doing this. There we go. Oh, great. That kind of went everywhere. Got some on my new shoes. Got some on my shorts. All right, there's our old seal. There's the new one. What we got to do with this new one, I've wiped this end of the axle tube out. Kind of just fit it in. Try to push it in evenly. These things aren't pressed in real tight. You can literally just push them in almost by hand all the way. I'm gonna get a see if I got any seal drivers that'll fit on there. Okay, so I've got a 2-inch socket that I'm going to use for a seal driver because I don't have any seal drivers big enough. You can also probably use a 2-inch piece of PVC. So I'm just going to tap it. Tap it in like so. I'll get some assembly lube or some wheel bearing grease and just hit this seal right here. Okay, so we've got seal in. I put some assembly lube in there. I put a little bit on the retainer right here that rides inside that seal. So now we'll grab the axle. Which is heavy, and carefully go back in. You gotta be careful not to hurt your seal as you're sliding back in. All right. We get our 4 nuts back on. We'll get our brake line hooked back up. And we'll have to bleed the brakes. We'll clean all this brake fluid, axle grease off. Hook our ABS sensor back up. Put our retaining bolts back in for a parking brake cable. And I'll probably pull this wheel spacer off and pull this rotor off and make sure that the parking brakes shoes are clean and all that looks good. I gotta clean the caliper off because it's pretty nasty. The lighting in here is bad on this side, and doing the best I can with this headlamp. And I got good lighting in here. It's just shadowy. This wall is close to the side and all that. So we're like I said, we'll get our 4 nuts resecured, get our caliper back on. I'll do that after I clean all this. But I get these park brake cables resecured. So if you're not doing a bearing in this thing, a wheel bearing, it's not necessary. If you're just doing the wheel seal, the axle seal, you don't have to press the bearing and all that, which is quite an ordeal with this axle setup. This is not an easy one to do if you're doing the bearings and everything, but we weren't having a bearing noise. We just had some fluid. So we're just going to clean the fluid up. We got a new seal in it. Hopefully we won't have anything else, any other problems with that, and we'll just keep an eye on everything and get her buttoned up. Little WD-40 around, and still fighting me a little bit. There we go. Just want to, I gotta clean this rotor up real good. Fortunately, we don't have anything on the brake shoes, so the leak wasn't getting to the parking brake shoes. You can see how it's inside the housing, so we're going to clean all this up real good. Get our pan back over here and spray this out with brake clean real good. Spray this rotor out real good, caliper, and get this reassembled. Alright, so we got the axle slid back in, we got the rotor back on, got all the parts cleaned up, got the wheel adapter back on. Now I'm changing out shims, brake shims, because we're putting new brake pads on. We're just matching them up, make sure we're using the right ones. Alright, put some brake pads on. They all look the same. Just positioning my boots right here for my caliper slide pins. I'm going to clean these off. They're real sticky. So I'll clean them off with brake clean and a rag, and then I'll put a little wheel bearing grease on there. These hold the caliper onto the bracket, and that's also how it slides. You want to make sure those are good and clean and greased up nice. This hole is pretty sticky, so I'm just plunging it in and out a few times just to clean some of that old stuff out there. I'll put some more grease on there when I'm done. When it feels like it's wanting to cooperate and slide freely, I'll go ahead and clean that bore out like that. I think you can pop these plugs out and clean all the way through them, but I don't think it's necessary right now. Some of that old grease is stuck in there from years and years of use. I slid my clip back in. Now I'm going to put my brake line back in, and then we can bleed the brakes. Crack the bleeder screw. We'll open it up a little bit and let gravity do its job for just a few minutes. This thing's not wanting to gravity bleed, so I've got my son Caleb up in there, and he's going to push the brake when I tell him to. And we're going to do just a little bit of old-fashioned bleeding here real quick. All right, Caleb, when I tell you, I want you to push that brake pedal down as far as you can and hold it. Don't release it. You understand what I'm saying?
You want me to?
Until I tell you to, okay? Go ahead and push it down. And hold it down once you get it down. Is it down?
Yeah, I got it hold down.
All right, hang on. All right, now let it up. When you let it up, kind of let up slowly, okay?
Next time?
Yep. All right, now push it down again. Okay, release it slowly. Okay, push it down again. All right, release it slowly. Push it down again. Pushing hard.
Yeah, I got it really hard. Can't go any farther.
I wonder if you're not going down far enough. Hang on a minute. As far as you can, hold it.
That's hard.
All right, release it. What's the pedal feel like? Does it feel hard all the time, or does it feel like it's
kind of hard, but
huh?
I mean, it's not too bad. Enough where I can push it.
Push it down.
What's it doing down for?
Hold it. Hold it down. You holding it?
Yeah.
Ooh.
Okay.
Getting some fluid out now. Let's shoot it halfway across the shop. All right. You still holding it?
Yeah.
Hold it tight. All right. Let up on it. All right. Push down. Hold it as hard as you can. Release it. Huh?
It went all the way down that time, I could tell.
Yep. All right, push it again. Hold it down. You holding it?
Yep.
It's down to the floor?
Yeah.
What in the world's going on? Crank this thing up.
Turn it on?
Yeah.
Key in it? It's right here in this side.
Yeah, put it in it. Put it in. Just turn it to the right.
I'm gonna have the brake down.
You see if you'll start without doing that. Now push it to the floor. Hold it. Wow, that thing puts out a lot of fluid. Okay. All right. We got it bled out. Got some little fluid to clean up here and made quite a mess. Yep. Okay, so if you're just changing your axle seal, that is the way to do it. It's not too terribly difficult. It is a little time consuming. You got to take some stuff apart, but it's not anything you can't pull off in a driveway or a garage at your house. If you're doing the bearings, now it's another story. We don't have a bearing problem. We just had a leak. But if you did have a bearing problem, you got to have some pretty heavy duty press to get the bearings out of that setup. It's not an easy deal. Probably not something you want to try to tackle at home. Just let a shop handle it that's set up for that kind of stuff. I'm not even set up for this kind of axle here. I've got a small press, but I wouldn't do this one. If it had to need bearings, I'd have to take it to another shop that had a bigger press. I just don't have the press set up for it. So I'm going to do the other side, the seal and the brakes on the other side, and that's going to wrap this one up. Appreciate you watching. Give me a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Appreciate you, and catch you in the next one. Thank you.